Hello, this is Marisol Solar-Thuralacher, psychotherapist and consultant, and this is the Resilience and Resistance Podcast, a podcast about successful Black, Indigenous women of color who have overcome trauma and become resilient. Hi, Allie.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. I'm so glad to have you on.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chit chat and see what unfolds.
Yeah. So I know a little bit about you professionally, just my curiosities on the Google, and just the wonderful things that I've heard about you from other people. But I'd love to just have you introduce yourself. Tell me about who you are, what you do, how you identify, and anything you would want to share with our audience.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I am Allie Duncan, and I am a yoga wellness studio owner in the historical Black district of Five Points in Denver, Colorado. And man, what else am I? I'm a life coach, energy healer, yoga teacher, and I am a grandma to 8 little babies. That's my favorite. What I am is that I'm a grandma, and I love it. And today is one of my little ones' first birthday. So yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So owning a yoga studio in Denver, I imagine is there's a lot of content there. I imagine every time people come to Denver, I'm actually a yoga instructor, and my joke is always that if you throw a rock, you're going to hit a yoga instructor in Denver.
Oh, a yoga instructor. I was thinking a yoga studio, but a yoga instructor.
Maybe both. Maybe if you threw a rock, you would hit both an instructor and a studio.
And a studio.
And then, being located in 5 Points, which I think is probably very intentional on your part.
You know what? It is and it isn't. So I grew up in Fort Collins. And my dad was the second Black male in Fort Collins, and that's where he settled and my mom settled and we were born. And he would drive us down to Denver to go to Black churches, and it would be like once a month. Yeah. And he'd always talk about 5 Points. And so, but it was from a place of, we were little too. And he'd be like, no, y'all stay away from this. And I was like, we don't even drive. Like, how can we get from Fort Collins to 5 Points? And we're like 7, like 6. Okay. But that's all I remember about 5 Points. And it was so interesting. There was a yoga studio that opened up in 5 Points, and I went to it. And I would just drive down there. I was like, oh, this is 5 Points. I remember my dad telling me about 5 Points. And then when I then fast forward, I was on Craigslist, and I wanted to create a studio where I wouldn't be the only Black yoga student rolling out my mat. And so I was on Craigslist, and this building just jumped out at me. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And then I looked at the address, and it was on Welton Street. And I was like, oh, 5 Points. And so it was like the building intentionally found me. And so I didn't plan it. I didn't search it out to be in 5 Points, but the building absolutely found me. Yeah.
So it seems as though, obviously there was some historical context, but it seemed to just unfold in a really beautiful way.
And I love it how the universe unfolds that way so I told my dad, I got this place, I'm opening a studio. And then he was all concerned, and he's just like, no, honey, you need to be careful on 5 Points. I was like, it's not what it was when you were down here. And then so he started asking me about all these restaurants, is so-and-so still open? Is this place open? And I was just like, no, it looks so different. But he did tell me a story. He goes, now, there's a pool hall, an old pool hall that used to be there. Is that still there? And I was like, that was my building. And so my dad used to play pool in the 50s at that pool hall. And
I love it.
So, and I just got full body goosebumps when he told me that. And I was like, that's my building. So the building itself is so amazing. It's a historical building, and it was built in the 1800s, and it's called the Douglas Building. And it's Frederick Douglass's family's mortuary in the 1800s.
Oh, wow. Gosh, Ellie, I didn't even know that, being a resident of Denver.
I love it so much. And it has a historical plaque on it. It has the urn carved into the original building up top. And the energy there, I just love it so much. So, yeah.
That's incredible. So going back to growing up in Fort Collins, I believe that our listenership expands past Colorado. So I do want to dig into that a little bit more and just understand more about how your family ended up there.
And it was by choice.
And yeah, I think that, obviously just you saying that you said your dad was the second Black man to reside in Fort Collins.
In Fort Collins.
Yeah. Which I think in itself is probably, I think probably as people listen to that is I think probably somewhat striking. But tell us a little bit more. How did your family end up in Fort Collins?
Yeah. So my dad was from Texas, and he was stationed in Cheyenne, Wyoming for the Air Force. And so he was stationed there. And then my mom was from Fort Lupton, which is a little bit south of Fort Collins. And her family is from Mexico, and she's Hispanic and Ute Indian. And so that's where she grew up. And it's so funny because the Black men stationed in the Air Force would come down to Fort Collins to go clubbing. And then the Hispanic girls would come up and go clubbing. And I kid you not, it still happens to this day. Like it's the same. I think it's so amazing. That was unfolding, and that was how our parents met.
Yeah.
Yes. And so yeah, he met my mom, and they got married, and there was 3 of us. I'm the youngest, and my dad, before I was born, he bought a piece of land. So it was 10 acres north of Fort Collins. And so that's where we were born and raised. And I know why my dad did it. I didn't understand it at first, but I know why he basically moved us out there to seclude us from everybody and everything. Like we had no television, no nothing, just because of his perception of the world, right? Like segregation, everything that he went through. And so I know now why he did it. At the time, I hated it so much. It was horrible, horrible, horrible. So, and there was challenges. We were the only Black girls growing up at school. And I mean, and it's so funny now that I look back and it's like, oh my gosh, it's textbook, like country folk, right? Like 100% racist. And so it was interesting. I remember one Halloween, I was in junior high, and there was a group of boys that were older than me. And I was so afraid of them. Like they were so mean, and they dressed up as the Ku Klux Klan for Halloween. And like, that was like accepted at that time. And that was in like the late 70s, early 80s. And it was just like me and my sister talking about it. I'm just like, man, we were, and when you look back at it, you're just like, whoa, that was a lot. But at the time, that's all we knew. Like that's all we knew. We weren't around any other Black people. We were around white people, like on a farm. And so we didn't have a TV. Like that was it. And so, and now that we're going and looking back, we're just like, man, there was some messed up stuff that went on.
It's so interesting that I think in those contexts where you grow up in such isolation, right? Without really understanding truly what maybe feeling the impact of those experiences, but not really knowing like, oh my God, like once you get some distance and maybe a little bit more opportunity, access, experience, then you start to realize like, oh my gosh, that really happened. I can't believe that happened.
Yeah. And it was crazy because my dad, so before I was born, I think my 2 sisters were already here. He experienced like some really racist stuff. So like men would light his alfalfa fields on fire and do all this stuff. And my dad he's super like just sweet natured, but he had an anger streak. And he like found them in town and he beat them and he ended up spending the night in jail. Like it was like just stuff on site. And this was just like a couple of years before I was born, or maybe even a year before I was born. And so just to think on like how like the gap wasn't that big from everything that was happening. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the reckoning right now in terms of our history is I think it's so easy. I think part of the way that white supremacy impacts us and the way that growing up in where racism is just baked into everything is that there's a way that we can kind of push off like, oh, that was a long time ago, or that was then, right? And I think that we definitely are coming into this place of understanding that that's now, it's not then.
Well, and it's crazy because, and I learned this. So, you know, the pictures of Martin Luther King, how everything was in black and white.
Mm-hmm.
They put it in black and white for a reason. So we think, oh my gosh, that was a long time ago.
Right.
But all those pictures are in color.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was 60 years ago, 50 years ago. And I was like, well, I'm almost 50. Like it was. So it's not like I'm sitting here just going like, oh my, like my grandparents' time. It's like, no, that was like, I was born in it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's, well, like when you sit and think about it, you're just like, oh my goodness. I did a timeline for the studio on like, you know, like when the slaves arrived and then the Emancipation Proclamation and then the Civil Rights Movement. And it's so like, it's just tiny. There's tiny little snippets.
It's tiny.
And I was like, oh, and here we are still. So
and
crazy.
Here we are. We're still in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what was your, this is the way that I'm going to ask it. It's so funny. I don't know why I'm asking it this way, but how did you end up getting out of Fort Collins? What prompted you to leave, or what was the progression?
When you say get out, it's like
that's what I meant.
Get out. But no, really, get out. And that totally makes sense.
Everyone in Fort Collins who's listening is going to be like, okay, I get it.
Totally get it. So growing up, my dad, he was really protective and abusive at the same time. And so we dealt with a lot of abuse and watched my mom go through it. And then finally, my second sister, she took my mom and left when she was, I want to say 14 or 15. And so I stayed out on the farm with my dad and my other sister. And then finally, we just all kind of trickled into town. And like living in town was like, oh my gosh, like I was big time, even though I was with my mom and my sister, because I've never experienced, like, understand, we didn't have running water in our house. We didn't have a TV. Everything was heated by wood stoves. And so when I tell my daughters that story, like they'll seriously just like, so what year were you born? Like expect it to like, right. You were just really poor. Yeah. Like you were so poor.
Yeah.
And my dad owned a lawn business. And so like he was known around town as Duncan. And he wore this huge hat and we just cut lawns and push snow. And so that was our thing. So when we moved into town, like there was a part of me that was like, you know, so sad about leaving my dad out there. But I really wanted to explore the city. And so I stayed in town, finished school. I was a teen mom. I had my daughter when I was 17. And so just navigating that whole life of being a teen mom, I got married and then I decided to become a police officer.
Oh, wow, Allie.
Yeah. So then I was like, oh, I'll do it. So I became the first Black female police officer in Fort Collins. Wow. And I was there for 10 years. And and it was, and here's my thing, like I didn't experience like blatant racism, but there's an undertone in Fort Collins and in Colorado, right? So you have the places that are majority white with a little sprinkle of brown and Black people. And so it's just an undertone versus where you go to the South and it's just out in your face.
Right.
Like just in your face. It's just totally different. So I started to see like the undertone even more when I became a police officer and having to deal with the citizens who were white and privileged and didn't appreciate me, basically telling them what to do. So that was 10 years. It was a great experience. I loved it a lot. And that shifted me. It changed and molded me a lot. And it has a lot to do with how I am today with like my whole no fucks to give attitude. That comes across now and again.
Oh, Allie, I have so many questions. Thank you so much for listening to the Resilience and Resistance podcast. If you're a listener of this podcast, you may know that I'm a psychotherapist in private practice, and I work with high-functioning, high-achieving adults who have some form of developmental trauma and realize that it's impacting them in some way, either personally or professionally. They live robust lives and want to feel unstuck from what they're experiencing. If you are that person or you know someone who could benefit from working with me or other therapists in my practice, feel free to visit our website at marisolurlacher.com.
Yes. Ask away. Ask away.
But before we get into that, because I think that, obviously a lot of curiosity about how being in the police force shaped you during those 10 years. Just backing up to the experience of childhood and experiencing violence in your home and your sister being the one to help your mom get out of that situation. In your reflection on that now, because I think obviously there's a lot of things that come up for me around that, right? Obviously the impact of sustaining that, witnessing that, all of the things that come with that, but just would like to hear more about where you've come to in terms of your own process around that and your own reflection of that time.
Yeah. The sister who took my dad or took my mom and moved into town, she's a doctor. So she's a psychiatrist now.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's funny because we talk and she's just like, most people who went through what we did are like on Prozac. Like I prescribed them Prozac or some type of medicine. But I truly believe that us working the land and farming and being around the animals, I think that so much of our stuff got transmuted by just being on the land. Because when I look at our life, like it was, it wasn't pleasant, but I don't have any, I know there's trauma there, but it's not like, it hasn't destroyed me. And so I know like we had to garden, we had to be up at the crack of dawn. Like we had a strict schedule and just like we had to take care of the animals and all that. And so I think a lot of that just got transmuted because I love my dad. Like we talk almost every day and my grandbabies bring us together because I share pictures and stuff. So it's like, that was a lot of healing that happened with the being on the land while I was there. And then also the babies.
Yeah.
A lot of healing.
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings about all that. Just understanding, as I look back that my dad blew his trauma into us. Yeah. Like he didn't do the work. Yeah. And just like his dad didn't do the work. Yeah. And so when I look back at it, I don't get mad because when we look at our ancestors, like they're just surviving. Like they're literally surviving. Yeah. They don't have time to go to yoga, do meditation. Like they're literally like, if I get pulled over, am I going to die? Yes. Or if I'm walking down the street as a young kid, am I going to get beat up and die? Like that was my dad's life. Right. And I saw it come through where if we wanted school friends to come over and spend the night, like he would go sleep in town in his truck. He would not be anywhere on the property. Yeah. Because just the like white women would accuse black men of, and that's what he knew. Yeah. And so, and I didn't get it when I was little. I'm just like, why is dad so weird? Yeah. I was like, why? And then now I was like, oh my gosh, that poor man. And so he never dealt with his trauma. Yeah. And then so blowing into us. And so it's not, and I love this saying, and I remember where I get it from. We're not responsible for what happens to us, but we're 100% responsible for our own healing. Yeah. Yeah. And so all the stuff that my mom and my dad pushed into us, like, that's fine. It happened. So now it's 100% up to me to do my healing. So I don't blow it into my girls and then they blow it into their kids. Yeah. And so, and I feel bad for my dad and just like how he was raised and in the time that he was raised. I thank God that I was not raised in that time. Yeah. It was just like horrible. Yeah. Just horrible. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like just a lot of the perspective and understanding of how that generational trauma or the unhealed generational trauma impacted him. Yeah. And thus, I think such a beautiful way to say it is it blew it into you. Yeah. And then you being able to stop that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, it's work and I'm not saying that I'm done. Like I'll get little bursts of things where I'll just start crying. Like last year when the Black Lives Matters I had so much rage come up. Yeah. I'm not a rageful person, but it was flat out rage. And I was like, oh, like this has been here and here it comes. Yeah. Just rage from what I was seeing and witnessing. And then to see the older Black people in my world, like my dad, and I have this group of older Black women who do dance and yoga at the studio, and they grew up in Five Points together. And so we meet every Wednesday. But that they're just like, yeah, this is nothing new.
Yeah.
Like this is all we've known. And here I am just like, what? Like I was just enraged.
Yeah.
The whole year.
Yes, as I think is valid. And it seems as though just your ability to be able to tap into that rage, like allow it to be present through what was happening.
It's funny. So I'm into energy and frequencies and recalibrating the body and all that. And I've come to embrace that I create some amazing, powerful shit when I'm enraged.
Yeah.
And so most people, like, when you're like from a state of gratitude, things create. I'm like, okay, I can get behind that. But when I'm pissed off, like, that energy, I'm just like, oh, here we go.
Yeah. Yes. It's so valuable. I think especially as women, or those of us who identify as women, and we're female socialized. There's this way that we disown rage in ourselves, right? And specifically, I think very particularly women of color, like rage is not useful, right? Especially, for those of us maybe who experienced rage coming at us at some point in our lives. Yeah. And it feels scary, and it feels like that's not something I want to continue to perpetuate. But, I think that rage, anger are useful, right? Our feelings, our emotional states are the things that motivate us. And anger is one that is the intent and purpose is to help us understand injustice and to create action in us.
Yes.
And so I think when we can harness that, it's so powerful. And
I see it, I watch it. So I was upset and frustrated that there wasn't any studios that were Black owned or that cater to the Black community. And so that pissed me off. And so I created Urban Sanctuary. And then Black Lives Matter. And I just got more rageful. And then my membership went up. And so I noticed every time I do a rant on Instagram, like my following goes up, my interaction goes up. But when I do post about, unity and let's all come together, no, I have 3 people. They're like, all right, I don't like it. I mean,
I'm feeling grateful today.
I know. It's like, she has a point, but when I am like, just coming from a place of like, I'm so fucking done with this. Like, that's my creative zone.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I've embraced it. Like, I'm not trying to hide it. And it's just, that stigma of an angry Black woman. And I even so we did a feedback form for our newsletter. And I had one lady who said, you can stop sharing your anger and just being an angry woman. And she just went off. And I was just like, oh, thank you. Thank you. Cause now I'm going to keep doing more. Now that I know that makes you uncomfortable, because when I do my talks, I'm not angry. Like, I'm passionate. I'm saddened. I'm like frustrated, but I'm never like just rageful. I think my husband's the only one who's seen my rage. Like I would stay up. Let me put it this way. I go to sleep at like 7:30, 8 o'clock every night. When Black Lives Matters happened, like 1 a.m, I would like keep waking him up. I'm just like, is this true? Is this really happening? And he's just like, oh, for fuck's sake, like go to sleep. And I was like, no, I need to know. I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
But I was productive, man. I was like, I made some shit happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, harnessing that energy and like allowing it to be and embracing it and not shying away from it, and knowing that like that type of feedback is probably being able to tune into that as like, oh, I'm actually doing the work that needs to be done, as opposed to recoiling.
Yes. Oh my gosh. If I ever hear from the white community, and especially from the yoga community, that, oh, we love your work, that we support you, then I know that I'm going into mainstream. And I'm just like, oh no, because I know based off of their Instagram and how they're not saying anything, they cringe, or they unfollow me and there's like, we can't watch this. So if anybody says like, oh my gosh, your work is so amazing, and they own a yoga studio, I'm all, am I becoming soft? Am I not speaking up loud enough?
Yeah, it makes you reevaluate what you're doing.
Yes, it 100% does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love it. And it's so powerful because it just shows the resilience, right? So I see the resilience in my dad, like all the things that he went through to where he is now and everything like that he taught us. And then I see the resilience of my mom and all the abuse that she went through. And she's like, she was so far ahead of her time. And at the time I despised her. I despised that woman. She made us drink warm lemon water first thing in the morning with a tablespoon of cod liver oil.
Oh, yeah.
And she'd make all of our food. Like she made us grain burgers.
Before grain burgers were
before grain burgers. And she would make homemade bread but she would pack it in our lunch and I'd be mortified because we'd have like this huge chunk of bread and she was horrible. And she would heal with herbs and stuff. And so now looking back, I was like, man, she was so advanced.
Yeah.
In her time, like she was like a little witch, and I loved it.
Yeah.
But just to see her and her resilience, and then that resilience that was passed on to me, the resilience of the land, the resilience of what I had to tap into while I was a police officer, because it asked of me to be someone who I had no idea even existed.
Yeah. So let's talk more about that, because it seems like that experience in itself, although feels very, I think probably maybe contradictory to like who you are now.
Yes. I get that a lot. Like, wait, what?
But it seems like there was a way that experience helped you tap into a part of yourself that you didn't know.
Yes. And it's fun to see it all come together. So I was like, yes, sir. No, ma'am. Like that, I never spoke back. I was basically a fantastic doormat as I got older. I was sexually assaulted, but I didn't want to say anything.
Yeah.
Just all this, like just not being good enough. And so I was my first marriage was very abusive. But I excused it because I saw that in my mom.
Right.
And then when I became a police officer, like that in itself opened up my eyes to be like, oh, the marriage that I'm in, I just arrested a guy who's doing the same thing. So I'm in an abusive relationship. So it just asked a lot of me to start stepping up. So one thing that they said was, my first time around, so I went through it twice, the interview and the hiring process. I didn't get it the first time because they were like, you have no command presence. Like you have no command presence. People aren't going to take you serious. So I sat with that and I was like, I absolutely didn't. Like, I was like really, soft spoken and all the things. So I sat with that and then I tried again and I kind of changed things up a little bit and I got hired. But when you go to a call and shit's going down, like, what it clicked in my head, like there's no one else to call.
Yeah, right. You're it.
You're it. And so to dig deep from that place to be like, oh no, you're it. Like people's lives are depending on it. Like this is it. That just triggered just stuff in me over 10 years of being it. Just that command presence, just that confidence. And believe me, it wasn't confidence all 10 years. I was just like, ooh, yikes. Like there was calls where I was just like, like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
This isn't fun at all. But that built up a part of me, even more resilience, right? Because when you're on a call and you have to dig deep and you get cussed at, you get called names, you get threatened, all the things. So you have to tap into this place where you're just like, yeah, I can't back down. It's like, it's just, you just can't.
Right. It's not an option in those moments.
It's not an option.
Yeah.
So then that just built up resilience. And the cool thing about it, and again, how cool the universe unfolds, is I met a lady my first year when I got hired, 2003, when she was in records. And her and I just clicked. And so she asked if I wanted to get a massage. And so we hung out, we talked, she did a massage, she did Reiki on me. And I didn't know what it was. And I was like, what are you doing? Like I could feel it. She was pulling things, like telling me things about myself. And so she told me what it was. And from that moment forward, like I did all the research. I got my attunements like my first year when I was a police officer. And then I started practicing on my fellow police officers.
Oh, wow.
And so the whole time that I was a police officer, I was practicing energy work because I just became obsessed with it. And then from Reiki, I went to quantum physics, like the quantum field. We went down to New Mexico to study with Dr. Bartlett. And it was just more and more and more. So being in the energy world really grounded me while I was a police officer.
Yeah.
Because I could take what I was learning and apply it to everything that I was experiencing. And I still do, to be like, this is interesting.
Wow, Allie, this is so fascinating, because it feels like this way that you were able not only to like own this part of you that felt more like, I mean, I have a voice that I can use and I can access as part of myself. That's like, I'm going to stand firm in the face of a lot of difficult situations. And then also this way that you were like understanding on a deeper consciousness and applying that to the work that you were doing.
I got so into it that my sergeant even gave me the okay to create a women's group. So when I would go to calls with domestic violence, I would give them my number and I would like invite them to my home and we would have women's groups and I would tell them about energy and all the things. I remember The Secret was big when I was a cop. So I ordered like everybody books and we would have book clubs. Like, because I wanted them to leave because my sergeant gave me the summer off one year, 2011. And I went to India for 7 weeks and I got my yoga teacher training in India. And I came back to the country and 5 months later, I quit my job.
Wow. So it's almost like your time at the police department was really just a vehicle to unfold your path.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And just to be able to build that part of me that was, that's just standing in my power. Because I don't see me doing that coming from how I was raised and watching my mom and just being intimidated by Black men because of my dad to be where I am now. Like I needed that.
Yeah.
That experience of just like, no, like this isn't going to happen. So yeah. Yeah.
And I imagine, again, going back to being a yoga studio, a Black female yoga studio owner in Denver, in Colorado. Yeah. I imagine that is also a useful part of yourself, as you were saying. But I think that, part of, I think, an issue that has arisen, probably nationwide, but, I think in the pockets of this country where yoga has taken more of a foothold, right, where there's a lot more access, there is this way that appropriation has happened and kind of the commercialization and, all of the things that have happened around the practice of yoga. And I would love to hear more about creating the space of Urban Sanctuary. Was really the intent and the vision to create a space for Black people to be able to have more access, right, to something that has been historically inaccessible. So I'd love to just hear more about that part for you, like how being in an appropriated space, right? A space that has been appropriated by white people, and then to be a Black woman in that space.
Yeah. It's been a journey. This will be our 5th year. And it didn't happen the first few years that I opened. It took me hiring Black yoga teachers. And I was like, just bring your people. Because obviously I'm not pulling them in. I still think I had the Fort Collins white vibe, like just because that's all I've known. I've never hung around Black people like every day, all day. There was none in Fort Collins.
Right.
And so when I come to Denver, I'm just like, okay, this is it. But everybody has their group, their circle, and I was new. And so I met some Black women and I told them that this is what I built. I would love, to come, like, you teach, bring your people. bring your friends, your family, all the things. And then we would have great turnouts. But then when those teachers are like, hey, school's up, open again, I can't teach, then everybody would go away. And I'm just like, no, come back. And so it kind of ebbed and flowed over the first few years, but 2020, it shifted everything. With the Black Lives Matters. We have so many Black students. We offer free classes. All of our BIPOC classes are free for the Black community. And that's where I started to see it. Last year opened my eyes to how racist Colorado is. And it came from, so that there was a Denver News piece story on my studio last year. And then the stuff that happened with kindness yoga. And I don't know details. I wasn't a part of it, but the response on that news thread, like people were saying the most horrible shit. And I was just like, I was in shock. And they were just saying all this stuff and negating my experience and other Black teachers who the article, had in it. And it was just so amazing that, wow, this is where I live. And then after that, like my eyes were open. I see the yoga studios who aren't saying anything, who ignore it, who refuse to even comment. And so it's loud now. It's so loud. And I'm just like, this was like on mute basically my whole life because it's what I've always known.
Right. Yeah. So the experience of being able to come into this awareness of like, this has been on mute my whole life.
Yes.
And now I understand it in a way that I wasn't able to before.
Yes. And it was crazy because my energy work, my coaching session. So this will be going on 15 years that I've been doing it. All of my clients have been white because that's where I live. And I've had clients for years and years and years. And another piece of this was last year when all this started going down, I would say 2 reached out to see how I was doing.
Wow.
2. And then I haven't heard from any of them since. None. And because and this is where I step into my place of my voice, where I started being vocal on Facebook, on Instagram, on all the things. And I was like, wow, I see how I was showing up in their world and why they felt comfortable with me. And now that this has shifted, they're just like, oh, we're not comfortable with it anymore. And which I'm 100% fine with. But again, that was really eye-opening to just be like, man, this many years and then nothing. And that is just, it's so loud that my clients are racist. Not that they wear the KKK, the little outfit or whatever.
They're not wearing the hood.
but they are, right? Because, and I love the whole, the definition, my husband gave me this definition of white supremacy. White supremacy is white normalcy. That's all it is. And so normal feels comfortable. When I step out and start speaking up and showing up as a Black woman and not just an energy healer or whatever, that normalcy shifts. And it's so amazing to see how many people sat back into their white supremacy because that was comfortable to them. And I still see it now in yoga studios where, a handful reached out to me. What can I do? How can I show up? All these things. And then, man, December 2020 hit, crickets.
Right.
2021, I haven't heard a peep.
Right. They're like, is that over yet?
Is that whole thing done?
Is it done now?
Call it quits?
Can we go back to normal?
I haven't heard a goddamn thing.
Yeah. Well, and I love the way that you say that because I think that when I talk about white supremacy a lot, and I think that people hear white supremacy and they think of this thing that feels very outside of their reality, And I think that that's when we think about white supremacy, like you said, it's like this idea of normalcy, like white is the standard, right? Like this is where everything is measured from.
Yep.
And I think that, and that's, I think thinking about the yoga world, I think that that is also the norm. I think that white bodies in that space have become the norm. Mm-hmm. And then it also, that's how white supremacy becomes so systemic, where once it becomes the norm and it becomes pervasive, then it becomes more difficult for BIPOC individuals to be able to, come into those spaces in a true and genuine, authentic way.
100%. And so all my teachers, except for 2, are all BIPOC. Mm-hmm. And it's that simple. If you want diversity in your studio, you have to have it reflect the teachers. Mm-hmm. And so I won't say the name, but there's a yoga studio, and she's a nice lady. And she's like asking, like, I don't know how to do this. And it's like, you just need to hire Black teachers. And she can't do it. Like, she won't do it. And I was like, it's actually really, like, don't talk about being diverse. Like, just do it. And her and I know that when she does, her numbers will go down. I promise you, because of the location of her studio. Mm-hmm. And I know this, but I mean, you either are or you aren't.
Right.
Like, that's all I can tell you. So
yes,
because oh my gosh, I can't even speak highly enough of my teacher. Like, and I've done yoga since my 20s. Like, it's been like going on 30 years of yoga. Yeah. And my teachers, like, they are so good. Like, I'm blown away. Like, and I'm just like, man, and it's funny because most of my students are white.
Yeah.
And they're just like, they're eating these teachers up. And I'm just like, they're so good. Like, they're just good. And it's diverse, and it's just magical.
Yeah.
And it's available to any yoga studio. I mean,
shocking. No, I think that's so true, right? Like, I think that people will come to this place. I call it willful ignorance. This, like, I don't know what to do, or I don't know how to do, like, how can I start to, and I think, we're in an age of information. We're in an age of where things are not hard.
It's not.
So, right. And I think that, this is a way that, it continues to, I think that, like, this sense of, I can stay willfully ignorant, and continue to do the same thing. Yeah. If I just continue to stay in the place of ignorance around this. And so to make it simple, is probably challenging.
I know they cringe. There's like, and she hasn't reached out for my advice since. I'm like, no, it's really simple. All you need to do is hire Black teachers. And she's like, oh yeah, for sure.
I'll get on that. Yep.
I know. Yeah. Let me revisit that. But I will have to say, I'm going to be on a panel Friday with Core Power Yoga. Mm-hmm. I met with their CEO and their regional manager. She's new. And I am so, like, I applaud them. They are doing the thing. Like, they did scholarships. They just graduated 600 Black women across the country, free scholarships. They're putting them in their studios. Like, she's serious. And she goes to other companies, and that's what she does, is just shift it up. But I'm just like, my hat's off, because they're following up. They're not playing small. They're not like trickling in a little bit. They're like, nope, we're going big.
Good.
Let's do this. Yeah. So that's reassuring. And I do believe if and I don't think a lot of people know what they're doing, but I feel once it gets out and they're surviving and everything's okay, right? Then I think other people will get on board. And same with Lululemon, right? Lululemon's slowly working their way, trying to change a little bit. You're like, you know what? I disagree. They're a little bit. They could be showing up bigger, but just like big names like that, if they would just step up, man, things would be so different, because this is not a Black issue. Mm-hmm. This is a white issue that white people need to fix. This is not a Black issue that needs to be empathized with. Mm-hmm. But if you look at all the Instagrams, like, it's brown and Black people standing up and saying this is enough. Like, I think I have one yoga girl that I follow, and she's white, and she's just all about it. And I was like, I like you. Thank you. For still, I know it's been a few months since Black Lives Matter happened that you're like, I appreciate you. But there's no other that I've seen. I'm sure there could be some out there, but man, it's just so disappointing. But if you look back at what Dr. Martin Luther King said, it's like he said the very same thing. Like white folks don't stay in for the fight. Like they'll do the little couple marches here and there, the little post, but they're not in it. Like they're not in it. And that was very like just disappointing. And then the cherry on the top was the election. When more white women voted for Trump the second time around than the first, I was like, oh, I'm done. I'm done. I like, how can you come back from that? Like, how can you just be like, no, I trust you. I'm just like, wait, what? Like, what? This is what it would be like if the polls came out and majority of Black men over white men voted for Trump. I would be looking at every Black man and just like going, no, you, sir, you're not okay.
Well, yeah. And there's a whole thing with the Latinx community. We could talk about that another time. It's an issue. Y'all.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. But I think that, to your point, I think it's so important. It's something that, in all our interviews, that we've talked about this. I think that is the core of it, is that racism is not for BIPOC people to fix or to continue to work consciousness and awareness toward. It is a white people issue that we need to continue to hand off, right? And I think that becomes really valuable, is the more that we can say, you know what, this isn't mine, this is actually yours. I think that is the continued message. That is the thing that we need to continue to do, is there will be no shift until white people can take ownership of fixing this.
It's the same thing if you look at feminism, right? Women could not give themselves equality. It had to come from men, right? The LGBTQIA couldn't give themselves, it had to come from the straight folks. Black people can't give ourselves equality. It has to come from the white. I mean, it's like, it's so simple. And then it's so simple and it's so loud that if it's not happening, it's because they don't want to. They just don't want to. And you're like, okay, then if you're not saying anything, why don't you want this to happen? Why don't you want to share power?
Right.
It's not like we're asking for revenge. We're not. I mean, some people maybe, but the majority, it's not that thing. And it's just baffling to me that all the things that have happened and that people aren't just saying, like, screaming, this isn't right. Right. And don't laugh at me, but I just learned that the 1980s crack epidemic was intentional and the CIA admitted to it. Just learned that like 2 weeks ago. Again, another burst of rage. Oh my goodness, I can't.
Right. If we nobody's
saying anything.
Right. Well, if we really learned history the way that it truly happened, there would probably be things would be different. The way that we would respond would be different.
Yeah. And the only thing that saves me is to just pull myself down into my little community, do what I can for the people who show up.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot when you think about it. It's a lot when you take it in and all the injustice that's been going on. But what an amazing resilience, like a story of resilience.
Yeah.
Is Black and brown people. Like,
yes.
If you think about it, like, I'm surprised any of us are still alive. Just like me and my sister were so surprised that we're not on Prozac.
Yeah. And Prozac is okay, y'all.
Oh, 100%.
Take your Prozac.
Take it. And if you don't have to take it, like, just go.
Don't take it. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Your total segue. This is perfect. Obviously this podcast is about resilience and, becoming resilient. And you've already spoken to this, but I would love for you to just tell me what resilience means to you.
Resilience. Resilience to me means going through something and then getting out on the other side and looking back and just being in awe that you did it. Right. So the version of you who got through it doesn't even recognize the version that was there at the beginning.
Yeah.
And so getting through something and being a wreck around it, getting through something and letting it torment you I don't believe is resilience. Getting through something and then coming out the other side and just going, oh my gosh, I'm stronger, I'm smarter, I'm more amazing than I was before it even happened. Like for me, that's resilience. Like going through some stuff and just being a shit show at the other end. I'm just like, we still have some work to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That it's a process. I think that someone just recently said that. I think it was just our previous interview, is this idea of becoming, right? That it's never ending, and that the you that you, like you said, that you get to look back and say like, oh man, that I'm totally different now. I'm transformed.
Totally different.
And then, who knows, a year from now we'll look back and recognize that we've been transformed again.
Because the me who is sitting here now and all the things that I've gone through, like even like traveling to India a couple of times by myself and having some like kind of scary situations occur, but getting through them, like the me who is sitting here now, first of all, I would never go there again by myself.
Right.
I'm like, what was I think? But I mean, it was magical. Absolutely love India. But just how you like, it does transform you. And always being able to look back in awe and just be like, oh my gosh, like that was me. That was awesome. And now look at me. And this is awesome. And then down and just keep doing that. It's like, oh my gosh, just awesome.
Yeah. Well, there are like a million other questions that I have for you, Allie. I feel like we just like,
we just scratched the surface.
We just scratched. I just ran my finger against the surface of your life. Because I feel like we really didn't even get into you being a mom and being a 17-year-old mom, which I love to dive into at some point. I'll
tell you, my daughters and my son are literally my best friends. I laugh and people are just like, oh, that's so sweet. But I don't have any friends except for my kids and my husband. Like I don't, and it's by choice. I'm just like so fulfilled. Like I don't need anything else. So yeah, I'm so happy with my family, my little crew.
Oh, I love that. And your babies.
And my grandbabies. Oh my goodness. I don't even know. I don't know. They're my worlds.
Yeah. It's a different kind of love.
It is. It is. And the girls know it. They're just like, you love our kids more than us. I'm just like, well, yes. Is that not obvious? I mean, I'm telling you, I don't even acknowledge you before I acknowledge your kids. Like, how clear can that be? They love me though.
I know. It's always good to be honest. Let's just say
it is. And they take really good care of them and their babies. So I know they're just like, yeah, whatever you want to do. You can love them and you can take them for the weekend too. So perfect.
Oh, Allie, thank you so much. And again, I really would love to have you back so we can talk more. And and
absolutely.
And we'll be continuing the conversation at some point.
Down for my soul, y'all. Yeah, for your soul, y'all. This ain't a theory, really. This ain't something that I made up or like to believe. It's not fucking selfish.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you or your company are looking to jump into the podcast world, now is the time. The Plug Agency is here to connect you to the full power of podcasting. You just record and leave the rest to us. The people are listening and want to hear from you. theplug-agency.com. That's theplug-agency.com. Click the link in the episode description for an exclusive offer.